What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Coach Steve Show podcast. Please make sure you hit the like button and the subscribe button on the YouTube channel. Leave a comment in the comment section down below. Follow it, rate it, all that good stuff, especially on Apple and iTunes. Helps go a long way with the show. We are going to talk about the Deshaun Watson suspension and see how that stacks up and how fair it is to the Calvin Ridley suspension and all that good stuff. We'll talk about that today on the show. So again, like and subscribe, all that good stuff. Please follow, rate it. Follow me on Twitter at Coach_Steve72, all that good stuff. So the ruling came out for Deshaun Watson, and it was told that he would be suspended for 6 games into this 2022-2023 NFL season. Now, it's no surprise that he was going to be suspended. If you guys follow the Patreon, I did a whole episode about it, just a sneak peek about it. So go check out the Patreon to listen to that. But we talked about how he needed to be suspended. And to be suspended, it had been rumored around 6 games, but I said it should be more. It said it could be more. Some think it's fair, some think it's not right, but a lot of people seem to think that 6 games is fair. Article around ESPN. This is fair and understandable because the allegations of sexual misconduct against Watson are disturbing and deal with the issue of how the NFL policies players when it comes to behavior towards women. The history of the league includes enough mishandling of that to justify criticism, and a lot of the reaction Monday seemed to root itself into that. Many expected to be disappointed by the outcome, and to a large extent they were. The judge came down and, suspended Deshaun Watson for 6 games. So let's talk about suspensions, and we'll talk about the Calvin Ridley thing because I had conversations with colleagues and talking about how this works. And so there's different conversations to this. I've never on a podcast talked about Calvin Ridley and that suspension. So we're going to talk about both. And there's an article written comparing some of the suspensions that the NFL has done. So we're going to have different conversations. So let's talk about Deshaun Watson first. We all know Deshaun Watson was dealing with lawsuits comparing to his sexual I guess you call them assaults into this. So we're going to look at an article that talks about exactly what we're going to talk about today, Calvin Ridley and Deshaun Watson. Judge Sue L. Robertson's decision to suspend Browns quarterback Deshaun Watson for 6 games, they seem to be fair, is what this article says. Watson has faced 24 lawsuits alleging sexual misconduct during massage therapy sessions. He got suspended for 6 games. Now, let's think about this. They talk about DeAndre Hopkins, which we can talk about PEDs and all that, but let's talk about Calvin Ridley. I think Calvin Ridley was suspended a whole season. He made $1,500 betting on some MFL, like in a parlay, and he got caught. So they go in and talk about the differences in between all of these suspensions. So let's talk about what the NFL looks at when suspending Deshaun Watson. Not the PEDs or anything like that. We're going to look at what the NFL does. The personal conduct policy relates to off-duty behavior, conduct that has no connection to the league's core business interest. So when they look at Deshaun Watson, they're looking at stuff that's happened outside of the NFL, happens outside of the game, from the building, anything else. And they compare this to a normal person like you and me and our jobs. In this article, they say the vast majority of American employers don't, won't, and can't police the private lives of their employers. If an employee faces multiple civil lawsuits unrelated to their workplace behavior, and or if he's investigated but never charged any crimes, the employer has no cause to do anything, which I believe that's not true. I've seen firsthand. So the NFL has cause to do something to players like Watson because the league and the NFL Players Association have agreed that the NFL can and should investigate the disciplined players who get in trouble away from work. Now, despite inherited flaws such as the inability to force non-employees of the league or its teams to cooperate, the NFL has the right and feels an obligation to take action against employees who have gotten into certain types of trouble. And remember, first, the NFL focused only on 4 cases of Deshaun Watson, not 24. Second, the NFL has the right to appeal the ruling to the NFL and turn to impose a much greater suspension than Judge Robertson's 6 games. So the NFL and their union, their player rights association, they've agreed that if they do something off of the field, that the NFL has a right to investigate it, and people are indifferent about this because, like here, they kind of compare it to a normal 9-to-5 job, which we'll talk to in a second. The reason why this is fair for the NFL to do outside of outside of playing the games is because NFL is a billion-dollar business, even though they claim to be non-for-profit. They are a huge conglomerate. They're the biggest pro sports probably in the whole world. I know soccer is big in the whole world, but if you compare NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, it's huge. Creates a lot of money, creates a lot of jobs. They have an image. So the image is that you're going to show up, do your job, play football because you get paid a ton of money. Coaches get paid, not as much as players, but they get paid good money. These players are making, your top tier players, or some making less, but they're making millions upon millions of dollars. You're getting paid millions upon millions of dollars. You are held to a higher standard than some normal 9-to-5 job, which we're comparing apples to oranges. I think everybody should be held to a high standard no matter what job you have. But in the NFL, you're always on TV. There's articles, there's podcasts, there's shows, there's cameras. You're going to be followed all over the place, especially when you're a high-profile person, especially when something like this happens. So we all know that Deshaun Watson, 20 of the 24, he was found, quote-unquote, not guilty, or they're settled. Well, now we're still waiting on this 4. So when we're waiting on this 4, the Browns still made the trade for him and guaranteed him over $200 million, which is insane, especially when you're still waiting on these 4 and you didn't know the suspension. Suspension comes out and it's 6 games. The NFL can now really investigate even more. And if there's something they don't like, the 6 games could move to a full season, could be 8 games. For all we know, it could be less, like Ben Roethlisberger. Ben Roethlisberger got accused of sexual misconduct, I believe it was 2010. He was originally suspended for 6 games, and then coming into the season said, we'll change it to 4. Now, this was settled. This was not something, it was bad, don't get me wrong, but it was settled. He was never found guilty. Similar situation to Deshaun Watson, where he's not found guilty. They're being settled. He's waiting on 4 more. But here's the difference. And I talked about it on my Patreon, so I'll give you a little sneak peek of that one. It's disturbing when there was 30, then it got moved to 24. There is no way all these women came together and said, let's get him. Now, maybe that's true. Maybe he did something they didn't like in one of his massages, and they knew that he got multiple massage people, and they all got together and said, let's get this guy. Highly unlikely. But this is quite disturbing. But it is hard to look at somebody and say, well, you weren't found guilty, you're innocent until proven guilty, and to suspend him. But again, NFL has an image to uphold, even though we'll talk about there's things they've screwed up. So right now he's suspended 6 games, where we all I think everybody believes he's guilty. Now, again, he is innocent until proven guilty. But again, I think all of us out there can admit that something's not right when there's 30 at the beginning, then there's 24 cases. And then the fact that you quick in a timely frame got 20 of them taken care of, but now we're waiting on 4. Could one of these 4 turn into he actually did something? There's still those messages out there that are quite disturbing. So all of this is disturbing, but he gets a 6-game suspension. So Now we have to look at compared to, because the big topic when this happened, and I brought it up, with coworkers and friends, this has been brought up on social media. This is brought up on, all the media. Calvin Ridley was also suspended. Calvin Ridley was suspended for the full year because he made a parlay bet on a game that he was just going to watch, wasn't even playing, and he made $1,500. Now, let's talk about this. The article continues to talk about Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley, they claim the suspension it has something to do directly into the NFL. Because when they talk about Deshaun Watson, it's outside. When you bet on a game and you work in that realm, it points into that. Now, I personally think the Calvin Ridley thing is weird to suspend him for a full year. NFL players can bet on NBA games, right? They can bet on Major League Baseball. They can bet on UFC fights. I understand them not be able to bet on games that in the place that they work in. What I don't understand is how's that fair to not do it? Now, I get it. Having a conversation where now guys are going to start changing how they play. And I get that. I understand it. Because if you're on a team and you bet on a different game and you tell that person, hey, I'm betting this much that you're going to get the over on these catches. What if that person goes up to the quarterback and says, okay, this guy's betting a lot of money on me to get me over 4 catches. I don't want him to win money, so don't throw me the football, or is he going to drop games? It is a slippery slope when you start going down that type of path. And I get it. So I'm not necessarily saying that NFL players, NBA players, Major League Baseball players should be able to bet on games where they work. I'm not quite going down that road. And I also, in a way, understand they want to make a point, and they're going to suspend Calvin Ridley for the full year to say, you guys will never bet on another NFL game forever because he was made an example of. And I kind of understand that. But I also don't, because it's inconsistent when we're doing suspensions. Calvin Ridley made a parlay bet on a game he wasn't playing in, on a game he was watching. He got caught because it was put somewhere. He only made $1,500, which to him, that's like $5. And they decide to suspend him for the year. Now I can understand a 6-game suspension, 8-game suspension, and players still would probably sit there and go, okay, well, I don't want that to happen. Which one is worse? Making that small parlay bet in a game that you are not playing in, compared to Deshaun Watson, who has 24 cases out there of sexual misconduct with masseuses, but then you have Calvin Ridley, who gets suspended for an entire year. Deshaun Watson, who has all that 6 games, Calvin Ridley a whole year. Now, the article, talks about, well, one is directly connected to the NFL, and so they can do that, and it's way different than what Deshaun Watson is because it's outside the NFL, because they're saying, well, the employer, if you do something inside the workplace, they have more right to do something to you than outside, which is true and not true. It's true because they cannot tell you what to do. For example, if you want to go out to a bar after work and, do all this and that, and you're out there having a good time, and then you do something stupid or say something stupid, that's your own personal time. If you go golf every day, that's on them. If you want to go to concerts and everything else, you have a drinking problem. Employer can't really do anything because that's your life. God forbid you go out there and you're doing drugs, but you're doing it in your own home. You're right. The employer If they hear about it, but it doesn't affect your work, and you're not like out in public, you're not on the news, you're at your own home, they really can't do anything about that. But how many times have we seen, especially since 2020, because something happened in the world and social media became big? We're not going to get into it, we're not going to say the words. But how many people have been fired because they go on podcasts, they go on these shows, or maybe at the workplace, they have their own opinion that all Americans, and I think everybody in the world should have, be able to right to say things, and they've been let go. Some places can let you go because they don't think you have the image. You're given a bad image. For example, talking about the drinking. Let's say you go home every day and drink. You're in the comfort of your home. You're not driving. There's nothing they can do. You go to a bar, do that, take an Uber, you're responsible. But let's say you go to a place, drink a lot, drive home, get in a wreck, or you get pulled over. You get a DUI. You've heard about employers firing people for a DUI. That's outside the workplace, though, but it goes back to that image thing. They can fire you. So this article claiming that most employers don't do anything because it's outside the workplace is nonsense, because some of these people that write this stuff, they're not connected to the real world because they make enough money. They're not connected to the 9 to 5, the 6 to 2 type of job. You work in a school, you're held to some standards. People that work in schools go out and do those things. It's socially acceptable. But when you start doing things that are unsocially acceptable, they could let a staff member go. You work for anybody. It's written somewhere when you sign up. Not every job, but some are written that way, like the NFL. Now, the NFL is, times 100 what us 9 to 5 people do. So this article talking about, I think personally, the suspensions are not fair. Now, again, when this comes out, NFL could make a decision, say instead of 6 games, it's going to be a whole year for Deshaun Watson. I don't think they'll go a full year because he's technically, as of right now, not found guilty, but you are bringing this bad image. But the other thing is, the NFL may only be doing it so that way they don't have to deal with it again. But the NFL has proven before they care about money. All they care about is money. So the fact that the Browns were allowed to give him $200 million, they've proven they don't care. They've proven that, Deshaun Watson didn't have to go with another thing to prove himself. What should have happened should have never been traded. Somehow Houston Texans could have got rid of him, or another team could have got him but said, you know what? If every team he was trying to go to, another team didn't want to take that on, maybe they take him on and say, well, we're not going to pay you this money. He hasn't had to go through trying to yet on an NFL point of earning back trust with people, because Cleveland Browns say, well, we believe that he didn't do it. We've talked to people, and yeah, maybe these next 4 are going to be shut cases like the other 20. But if you really want to talk about image, I don't think what Calvin Ridley did was that bad, because he didn't bet on a game he was in. That's a real slippery slope. If, hey, if I put this much money down and I catch more than 4 passes, I'm gonna make this much money. Then you go to your quarterback and say, I'll split the money with you, and then you're gonna start seeing him drop pass. You're gonna start seeing forced passes and everything else. So I'm not saying that necessarily that gambling has to happen in the sport part, in the sport that they play. But also when you're inconsistent with suspensions on what actually hurts your image more than the other, and the personal conduct policy of the NFL has, I think the Deshaun Watson one is more hurtful in the image. I think it is disgusting that you're putting yourself in these situations where Calvin Ridley made like $100 bet or whatever it was and made $1,500 on whatever. Suspend him for like 2 or 3 games, and I think Calvin Ridley would have said, okay, not going to do it no more. So I think these suspensions are not equal. It's not the same. And we can't compare the NFL all to employers like we all work for, because every situation is different. Employers have fired people because of what's happened outside of their job, whether it was DUI, whether it was, they they go on and they say something bad about the place they work, but it's outside the work, doesn't affect their job. So there's things that happen, but people that write these articles that are disconnected from the world don't know that. So all of this doesn't add up. It doesn't work. So I think it's unfair for Calvin Ridley to suspend for a full year while Deshaun Watson, who has a worse thing happening right now where it doesn't seem right when you've got 24 cases when it was originally 30 for sexual harassment going on, where all Calvin Ridley did was bet. It makes no sense. The NFL needs to really look at how they suspend people when they have to make an example out of somebody, where Deshaun Watson could have been maybe even Ben Roethlisberger could have made an example of, but the Deshaun Watson one should have been made an example of instead of Calvin Ridley. Doesn't seem to add up. So I think the NFL needs to really reevaluate how they look at suspending people and make it fair, consistent to what they really define as the image of the NFL and what is acceptable and not acceptable moving forward, and just keep it consistent for the players and just make it fair. That's it for today's episode. Please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow, rate it, especially on iTunes and Apple, all that good stuff. Please check out all the affiliates in the description below. Leave a comment in the comment section down below as well. Send me a message at coach_Steve72 if you want to go on the podcast. We'll try to make it work. Follow me there. All that good stuff. Thank you guys again for watching and or listening. Check out all the other episodes. This is Coach Steve, and we will see you next time.